glasses somewhere. I have to go find them.
Okay, we'll wait for just for a second. But thanks for letting me know.
Smile, be happy. Oh, it's Thursday.
Exactly.
Thank you.
That's right, exactly. All right. All right. I'll call the special meeting of the Federal Way City Council meeting to order for September 29th, 2022. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. We've got three different presentations. First, we'll start with our budget presentations for the police department. We'll have Chief Wong address us. Chief?
All right. Good evening, Mayor Farrell, Council President Kochmar, Deputy Mayor Honda, and members of the council. It is my pleasure to present to you the Police Department's proposed biennial budget. I want to first thank City Administrator Davis and Finance Director Groom for their leadership and providing support for the management team. It was a very smooth process for us. We appreciate that very much. I'd like to quickly just introduce our command staff members, individuals who have division and section responsibility and hold key leadership positions within the agency. Closest to me is Deputy Chief, if you could maybe stand, command staff, Deputy Chief Steve Neal. He oversees our support services division. And we have Deputy Chief Kyle Sumter. He's not with us today. He's in a court proceeding. There's a good possibility he'll pop in here, but he is coming down from Seattle, so I don't know how bad the traffic is. Next to Steve is our Lynette Allen. She's our office manager. She serves in the office of the chief and provides support to the police chief and the two deputy chiefs. She oversees an employee in the animal services unit. And then next to Lynette is Commander Ray Bunk. He oversees our swing shift and night shift, so he's responsible for 2/3 of our patrol officers assigned to the field operations division. Next to him is Kerry Murphy, and he is our specialty commander. He oversees the mall, school resource officer, special operations unit. And then Tracy Grossnickel, he's a commander. He's assigned to our criminal investigation section, so he oversees the detectives and other units, which I'll share with you. In addition to the day-to-day operation, they also are on call, and they respond to critical incidents and take over as incident commanders when we have major incidents within the city. So thank you very much. Okay, so here's the overview of the presentation. I'm not so sure why there's this box. I don't know if we can get rid of that or not, but maybe it'll go away. So overview, department staff overview. I'll share with you our macro view of our organizational chart showing our two divisions and responsibilities. And then we have 21, 22 key accomplishments. I'll share some of those with you. And then program requests, what's funded, what's unfunded, and our goals for 23 and 24. Director? Thank you. And I would ask that this presentation is maybe 15, 20 minutes, and if you have a question during the process, please don't hesitate asking. Okay, so here's our macro view of our organizational chart. So we have total of 186 FTEs, employees within the police department. Professional standards commander, Commander Schwan, he had another business meeting tonight. He couldn't be here. But he reports to me part-time on professional standards matters, but otherwise he reports to the Support Services Deputy Chief Steve Neal on his other assignments. And then we have Lynette Allen, which you met this evening. And then in field operations, this is our uniform side. This is where we have most of our employees signed. Uniform division, field operations. And then you see patrol, services, traffic, special operations unit, contracted police services, specialty teams, neighborhood resource center, and Safe City program. That all falls under Deputy Chief Kyle Sumter. Under Deputy Chief Steve Neal, we have our criminal investigations, and that has persons and property crimes, special investigations unit, gangs, Valley Investigation Team, VET. And then on the administration side, administration is responsible, that's under Commander Schwan. There's budget, training, recruitment and hiring, internal investigations, CLIA, quartermaster, fleet, jail administration, and volunteers. And then our civilian operations manager, Diane Shines. She's our highest ranking civilian person within the police department, part of our command staff. She's not here tonight. She has a family emergency that she had to attend to. Okay, so our department overview staffing. Our police department has authorized 150 sworn officer positions. What I would tell you is that last probably 2.5 years during the anti-police movement, the reform laws, we did lose a lot of police officers. There are men and women that I work with within the department for a number of years. When these reform laws came, I mean, many of them came into my office and said, Chief, this, I enjoy working here, but this seemed like the good time for me to leave this profession. So we lost quite a few people. So I would tell you, organizationally, we have a lot of new employees. We're in the process of building and training lots of new people. The next generation officers are coming up now through the organization. So currently today we have 9 vacancies. As you know, you gave us additional 13 officers in 2022. We're on our way of filling these positions. I was told today, I got a briefing, that we have currently 12 background investigations. 5 candidates look very promising. We have 1 lateral candidate. So I anticipate next 3 to 4 months, 6 months, this number will be reduced. But there's, when you have 186 employees, you always have some level of attrition. And then our civilian position side, we're authorized 36 positions. Currently, we have 4 vacancies, all in the record specialist positions. And I want to thank the policy group for the collective bargaining agreement with the PSSA. The new salary range is certainly helping. We're doing probably 9 backgrounds right now of record specialists. When we get those done, these positions will be filled. So then, of course, the training, the new employees coming into the organization. We are a 24/7, 365-day operation. We have 3 shifts, day shift, swing, and nights. And we have 6 squads, 2 squads per shift, and that provides the 24/7, 365-day coverage. We average about 75,000 calls for service. That's about 200 calls, 205 to be exact. We just did 75,000, 365 days. We're certainly a busy agency. We're a growing community. We have major access roads through our town, and people who don't even live in our town, whether it's Browns Point, unincorporated, Milton, they all come into Federal Way for business, and so we are a busy community. As I mentioned, 186 FTEs, 2 divisions. Deputy chiefs have division responsibilities. Commanders have section responsibilities. And then we have about 17 work units, and that's where supervisors come into place. That's how we command and control within the police department reporting system structure-wise to maintain control and command of our agency. All right, so 2020-21 key accomplishments. We maintain national accreditation rating with a Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CLIA. We are one of 8 nationally accredited law enforcement agencies in the state of Washington. And I would tell you that being CLIA accredited just allows us to have sound, established practices that meets national standards. And we develop our policies on the national standards. I would tell you that being an accredited agency is just a continual improvement. If you look at improving the policing, whether it's at the federal level or state level. They're encouraging police departments to become accredited. That's one way of improving or the professionalism of policing. And I'm going to tell you, we're not perfect, but we're shooting for excellence, and being one of 8 is something that the policy group should be very proud of. We're also seeking state accreditation, and we should be accredited later this year. So we'll be one of 3 agencies in the state of Washington that will be nationally accredited and state accreditation. It's been a lot of work, but that should happen, and when that happens, I will be reporting to the policy group. We provided all state and CLIA mandated training, including fair and impartial policing, crisis intervention training, use of force, de-escalation training, reality-based training. The training is more important than ever before because we have new people coming in. We have probably 12 people in our field training program. We have 4 more officers graduating from the academy next week. They'll be put into the field training program. So we have new officers really coming into our agency. So that'll be one of the challenges that we're facing as an organization. We implemented the body-worn camera program last year. Patrol maintained continuity of response time and was proactive in finding solution for neighborhood crime problems. For all calls, we average 18 minutes, from somebody calling 911 to an officer arriving. Of the 75,000 calls for service, our average time is 18 minutes, and for a priority 1 emergency call, it's under 5 minutes as an organization. So over the years, even during depolicing or defunding, we've been able to just pretty much maintain our staffing and maintain our calls for service. It is one of the measurements that I look at as a CEO to make sure, do I have the right staffing in the right places? And then I would tell you that we've been really good as an organization to eliminate problems. For example, if we have a drug house, we sign our special operations unit, special investigations unit, and no matter how long it takes, we get rid of those, whether it's a drug house. We had a compound where we knew known criminals were frequenting. It took us a long time, but we got rid of it. I would tell you another problem area, Westway area. We had significant amount of gun violence. It's been quiet, for some time now. It's because the funding that you provided, extra presence that we provided, but we don't just patrol. We figure out, okay, which homes are creating the problem in the neighborhood, and then we try to eliminate that problem, to try to get to the root cause. Another area that we've reduced gun violence is Park 16. Also pleased to report that we made significant movement at Eastwind. It's currently closed, so there are no guests at that motel. They're building a fence around it so people aren't coming and going, and they're refurbishing the motel, but the new ownership are committed to working with us, and they want to eliminate significant amount of problems. So if you go by Eastwind Motel right now, it's awfully quiet. So that's been really good.
Chief Deputy Mayor has a question.
Chief,
Oh, yes.
since you brought up that motel, where did the people in the motel go if it's been cleared out? Are they camping somewhere?
I'm sure they found, they're not in Federal Way, but many of them, some of them brought U-Hauls, some of them brought vehicles. They had vehicles, so we saw many of them leave. There were some individuals that didn't want to leave, and they weren't paying, rent to stay there. So we provided some support getting people out towards the end, but they had to get everybody out to remodel.
Yes.
But bottom line is, I'm sure they found housing, elsewhere. Because they were paying there, they probably went to other motels.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Monthly crime analysis information distribution and implementation of directed patrol and operational plans. So our crime analyst is regularly feeding us information about crime and individuals and problem areas. But one of the things that we do in our organization is we have an all supervisors meeting once a month. That's where the crime analyst comes in, shares with us crime data, and then we have focus. So commanders, section responsibility will be given task of creating ops plans, whether it's shoplifting sting operations, problem area, drug activity. We've done numerous undercover operations at Eastwind and other places too, arresting drug dealers. So and that's where the commanders come into play, coordinating department effort to carry out. But crime analysis information is critical. And then retail theft and safety initiative, I talked about shoplifting sting operations, but we also added a 5th officer to our special operations unit. So a corporal was added to that unit to provide more oversight, and also that's our 5th. So that's additional 40 hours that they focus on downtown. So we added visibility beginning in the summer, bicycle unit to have more visibility, and they also work with the illegal encampments and homeless population. So we added a body to that unit. We maintain the registered sex offender verification program, and we do this with the grant funding, but depending on the level, registered level that they are, level 1, level 2, or level 3, we'll check in with them annually, biannually, or on a quarterly basis to make sure they're in compliance. And then solve several high-profile violent crimes. I couldn't be more proud of our detectives in our criminal investigation section. Over the years, they're very talented, and they're good at solving these crimes. When we have violent crimes, homicides, there's nothing more important than solving those crimes. When the public has forgotten about it, when the media has forgotten about it, and you get my emails once in a while, 2 years later, we make an arrest. We don't rest. We continue to work if there's any leads that we could follow up. Then regional efforts in auto theft by participating in Puget Sound Auto Theft Task Force. Our city is the fiscal agent for this task force. That's Pierce County, King County Task Force that involves law enforcement from King, Pierce, and Washington State Patrol. We are the agency. We are the lead agency. We provide oversight. So Commander Grossnickel and myself oversee this particular task force. Crime analysis and prevention specialist, CAPS unit. Even during the pandemic, we've continued to do the outreach, solve problems. Positive Tickets program. We've had different organizations involved, but right now we have Wild Waves they're very generous, gave us tickets. Chick-fil-A participated with us this year, and Sub-Zero, very generous, allowed our program to just continue. So it's great to have these business owners partnering with us, and Coffee with a Cop program, Citizens Police Academy. We're continuing to do community outreach. And one of the things I'm really proud of, working with Director Fitchner and others in the agency and IT, we've continued to expand our Safe City Camera program to enhance public safety. I think we're ways ahead in terms of other jurisdictions when it comes to video surveillance technology. We have about 260 cameras. With these cameras, we have about 400 views. So with these cameras, we can track, when we have crime, we've tracked vehicles, real-time, individuals. We can also, in particular intersections, we have license plate readers. Now, we don't tell the public where they're at, but these cameras have such good resolution that we can actually record license plates, and it's helped us solve crime. There was a road rage shooting in Tacoma, coming up the hill from Marine Drive. Somebody was shot, serious injury, and they went through one of our intersections with license plate readers. And we told Tacoma immediately who the suspect vehicle was, and that individual was in custody, within 24 hours. So that's how it works. We use automated license plate reader, ALPR technology. We have 4 patrol vehicles equipped with ALPR, and they can read thousands of license plates on a given shift. And we find stolen vehicles on a regular basis with this vehicle. What's happened now is we're probably way over 500 vehicles that have failed to yield from us since the passage of House Bill 1054. In just one agency, we've had more than 500 vehicles just fail to yield and run from us. We can't pursue anymore, but with this technology, we're finding vehicles. And sometimes they're occupied. If they are, we put road spikes down behind them if we can. We know if it's occupied. When they drive away, they get the flat tire. We can't pursue, but we can use other tactics right now. And then I shared with you our LPR, license plate reader technology. And right now, a lot of other jurisdictions are going to this type of technology, not necessarily our same system, but they're moving. That's why I say we feel like we're way ahead, because we've had other jurisdictions contact us. This isn't a one-year project. It's got to be continual project. Okay, so new program requests. What's funded? 13 police officer positions. As I mentioned, in 22, you allowed us to increase our police staffing by 13 police officers. That brings it to 150 officers. We're asking that these officers continue to be funded for years 2023 and 24 at $1.5 million. Valley Communications, we saw a significant increase in costs in 23 this year, about 13%. So we're asking for additional $330,000 just for dispatching cost. And then body-worn camera program. To maintain the program, we need $460,000 for both years. And then police vehicle replacement. In 23, we have 5, this is regular schedule replacement vehicles. We have 5 unmarked, 11 marked vehicles, and 2 motorcycles. And that's at just over $1 million. And 24, just 2 patrol vehicles to replace. The next item, vehicle equipment replacement, we need $220,000 for 23, $30,000 for 24. And that's just simply to buy the laptops, the mounts, the equipment that goes inside the police vehicle. And then vacation payout by collective bargaining agreement are sworn, the guild officers mainly, they have option to pay out, option to get a payout on certain amount of time on their vacation payout. And then major crimes mapping, FARO. This is a 3D mapping equipment for accident scenes. Typically, we use them for fatality accidents or crime scenes. We only have one FARO, and one of our weaknesses is that if that equipment goes down, then we got to call in the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab to assist us. By having a second equipment, if one goes in for maintenance or breaks down, we're ready to go. We don't have to rely on another jurisdiction to come help us. And that's $75,000 one time with replacement reserve. And the major crime scene investigation software, we're asking for $28,000. This is really for cell phone, accessing cell phones. Most of the crimes now, when we solve violent crimes and other crimes, we quite often go into telephones, cell phones, smartphones. So we need the software to get into the smartphone and then software to extract it. And there just about every crime involves a cell phone now. So we want to be able to do this on our own and not rely on another jurisdiction. So we want to continue to be able to do that. Training budget, it's $81,000. It was reduced during the Great Recession. We're asking it to be restored back to $150,000 a year. The academy used to be free, went up to $1,000 for new recruits. Used to be free, went up to $1,000. Now it's up to like $4,250. Over $4,000 for every recruit that we send. Now we have more officers as well, and training is going to be more important than ever with new officers coming in. We are spending tremendous amount of time as an organization training new people because we've lost lots of experience within our agency.
Chief, the council president has a question.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering, Mayor Harrell from Seattle put in his budget gunshot detection software. Would that be anything we would be interested in looking at? I know we get a lot of people on the social media talking about gunshots, hearing gunshots. But if we had the detection software, you could pinpoint where it was coming from.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's not a bad technology, but I've looked at that. I don't know if it's cost-effective for us, per se. Our city isn't as big as Seattle. We don't have the high concentration of shootings that Seattle might experience in a particular district or area. So I've looked at that before, and I kind of not instituted or implemented that technology. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, like I said, we don't have the volume of shootings that some jurisdictions have. And then hiring bonus payout, we pay
Chief, Councilmember Cephedos has a question.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. The body-worn cameras, the $460,000 a year,
Yes.
so what is that for, and is this an occurring annual expense?
Yes, when we implemented the body-worn camera program, there was a one-time cost for $1 million. So now, after the initial cost of buying the equipment and so forth, that included the ongoing cost. But bottom line is, we need to have body-worn cameras, the storage, the equipment, the replacement, all the things that go along with storing the information stuff. The company's charging us $460,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then thank you, that's helpful. Vacation payout, isn't that part of the salary? So why is it called out?
Right, it's not budgeted, so I'm seeking approval. So bottom line is, there's a collective bargaining agreement that not all employees take this option of being able to cash out some vacation time, but it's in their collective bargaining agreement that they can cash out up to 40 hours. So, you know, I need the fund, because it's not budgeted, I need the funding approval from the policy group to be able to pay that out.
So this is different from people take vacation, you know, 2-week vacation.
Correct. They can
That's
take their
paid.
vacation, we encourage them to take vacation, but at the end of the year, they have one-time option to cash out their vacation time. And for the whole department, I need $120,000 to pay that out
Okay,
per
Thank you,
contract.
that's helpful.
All right. Councilor Dovey?
The question I had on the 13 officers, 1.5 million in '23 and then '24, there's no inflation or no pay raises or anything, it's just flatted, or would there be more in 2024?
Well, employees come in at different, you know, pay scale. So with that, I think there's cushion built in
Okay.
for
I
salary and
just-
benefit. 'Cause-
Just flat rated it, I thought maybe there'd be some more in 2024, and maybe it should be a higher number.
This is where I thank Director Groom, because he rounded up to make sure that there was enough. So there could be some salary savings to do other things, which I'll share in the next slide.
Steve, you want to explain that a bit?
I'd like to give you a much more highly technical explanation, but I think we just ballparked it, and we will adjust it as we go. I know that there's a vacation factor, and it's an estimate. You're exactly right. In real life, there will absolutely be escalation.
Yep. Okay, it was a good catch, actually. As soon as you said that, I thought that rung true. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So I have 3 questions right now. Valley Communications, there's going to be an increase. I experienced this, but I've heard other people tell me about this too. I called 911 once this year and was put on hold without even asking why I was calling before I went on hold. And I was on hold for 2 minutes. Is this going to prevent that? Are we going to get more people there? Is this for staffing? Is that why the increase is being asked for?
It's for a multitude of things. So being put on hold for calling 911 is probably an unusual occurrence for them. But depending on what's happening, if we have a critical incident or something happens regionally, or maybe not even that, but there are times, you can't always predict when people are gonna call and the emergencies that occur. But generally, just like the police department, they staff accordingly so they can deal with the volume. But there may be times where there are just simply too many calls coming in, not enough people that are available to answer the phone, and it can be on hold. That could happen even in the police department. Certain times we staff it accordingly, but there are just too many calls coming in, we prioritize. It's unusual occurrence, but I don't know if they're adding more FTEs, but I know part of it is a collective bargaining agreement with the different, you know, labor groups, just expenses, things are going up, and they have some projects they wanted to implement, so those are the increases, but I can't tell you precisely how many FTEs that they're increasing, but I know they're increasing some FTEs in the technology aspect, but
Well,
they're-
let me say as well that, I sit on the board for the for the Valley Communications. And all we need is to know a situation like that, we can always research it if we know when it happened. So if anybody experiences anything like that, or their family or friends or their neighbors do, let us know, and we can have the folks there look into what happened. Because that is not appropriate. When you call 911, you shouldn't be put on hold without some sort of triage to know that it could wait. You could
Yeah, I
you
mean-
could have been in total crisis.
Yeah, I wasn't even asked why I was
Right.
calling. All right, thank you. And then my second question is overtime. I don't see that in the budget that it's in front of me, the numbers. With the new officers being hired, will you still anticipate having as much overtime as you've had in the past?
yeah, that's on my next slide.
Okay,
So I
okay.
could certainly address that next slide if,
And then my last question for right now is Office of the Chief. What exactly is that? Is that your salary, or under expenditure summary, Office of the Chief? And it's 199.5%. change from before.
From the adjusted budget?
Right,
Yeah. It's really, so what happened is, I actually asked that question, what was budgeted? That we're doing special directed emphasis patrols. So what finance did is they took some money from that line item to pay for other items. So really, when you look at the 430-something, it's not an increase. If you look at what was budgeted and that, it's the same dollar amount. They just happened to borrow a little bit. So in the adjusted portion, it was lower. So Director Grubman and I talked about that. Hey, what happened here? He said, yeah, we borrowed we moved money, and they're just basically moving money around. So in that adjusted part, it looks lower, but if you look at what was budgeted, there's no increase.
thank you.
Okay. So the next slide, this is what's not budgeted. So the first item is directed emphasis patrol. And one of the asks was $537,000. And how did we come up with that number? Last year, the policy group gave us $1 million. $767,000 is general, our overtime budget. You gave us an extra $1 million, and we had some surge of gun violence at that time. So the direction was, hey, let's put more, what do you need? Police department, we said we need to put more boots on the ground. So with that $1 million, what we were able to do was put 6 additional officers, 8-hour shifts. And we put them downtown. We put it down at 330 3rd and Pack Highway, Westway, 21st, 336. And this was ongoing. So our thought process is now we have more officers coming on. We have quite a few in training. So I'm anticipating in '23, many of these officers will be deployed, even more than what we have now. So what we were doing is, okay, how about 3 officers, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week? And that's where it comes to $537,000. And then '24, we're thinking is, okay, let's reduce it to 2 officers, additional 2 officers, addition to what's regularly scheduled patrol officers. So what we're gonna do here is, it doesn't mean we're not gonna do it, but Director Grubman we're gonna look at our salary savings. And if something big happens, let's say we have rash of robberies and we have to put more officers out there that could just not responding to calls. When you're responding to calls, you're focused on getting to the calls, and the supervisors and commanders are making sure we're getting to the calls to, not create that frustration in the community where people are waiting for hours. We're constantly monitoring calls. So let's put a couple officers out where they're just focused on doing surveillance. So they're not answering the radio. They're paying attention, but they're mission specific. So that's what we're gonna do, but what we're gonna do is if something happens, we'll do it, and I think Director Grubman and I'll work on, okay, what salary savings do we have, and can we, how do we pay for that? We may come to you for a budget adjustment, but I'll tell you what, it has helped. We've been able to use these officers, it's hard to measure what hasn't occurred, but I know it's had positive impact on gun violence. We are down on gun violence through July, 28% compared to last year. I would tell you it's still too high, but compared to the surge and the rash that we had in '21, we are lower of, people getting shot and killed, people getting shot and injured, our numbers are down. But still, I would tell you, I'm not saying I'm satisfied, it's just a little less than last year, and I would contribute that to extra patrols in problem areas, hot spots. And then officer wellness, we want to do 75,000. Officers see a lot of trauma. So having mental health professional come in and visit with doctors, our chaplains visiting with our doctor. This is chaplain visiting with our officers. It's all good. So what we're going to do is there's grant opportunity at the state level. State is creating a new app to deal with officer wellness. We'll, tap into that, but we'll look for grant opportunities in other ways. But it doesn't mean it's not there. Maybe, maybe we can afford it later, but that was that. And then I would say if we were going to add another FT in the police department, the next position is just quartermaster. The quartermaster that we have, she is just overworked, but she's dynamic, great, hardworking person. But eventually, we like to get somebody else in there. Maybe if we can't do full-time, maybe part-time, but we want to do something there to augment that area. And we're also increasing our fleet in the police department. She's running around doing a bunch of stuff, so.
Councilmember Walsh?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of going back to the crime reduction, violent crime reduction this year, how many murders have there been this year? And at this same, roughly the same point last year and in 2020, how does it compare?
It's hard to, okay, last year we had total 11 murders. We are at 7 year-to-date.
Okay, all right. And in 2020, do you recall?
Probably 5 or 6.
Okay.
That's a typical year,
Okay,
yeah. But last year, we saw a surge.
okay. All right, thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor, and then,
Officer wellness, that was something that was really important to the council, that was in the budget. If our officers are needing any kind of help in any way to help them with their, with what they do, because they see things and do things that most people don't have to do, I think that's a priority. And I wouldn't want to wait around for a state grant that, even if it came, there's still a wait period before you would be getting the funding, so.
okay, so Steve?
I think this one, we can almost blame finance for, because one of the big commitment I made to all departments was, tell me what's not in the budget, tell me what you need. And when we get to the end of the revenues, we will keep the needs, so that if we get more revenue, if we get more savings, the next dollar, we want to keep the next priorities. And that's where these things that are on the unfunded list are. We're not saying they're not important, we're just saying that those are the next priorities after the forecasted revenue.
Okay, Councilmember Suffolk Dawson?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about quartermaster. Can
Yes.
you explain to us what that is?
So essentially, quartermaster is responsible for all of our, our equipment. So she maintains, the patrol vehicle fleet, unmarked vehicle fleet. She keeps track of them, makes sure they get maintenance, they get serviced. She keeps track of all our uniforms, equipment that we issue out. She keeps track of all that, ballistic vests. So anything to do with generally equipment that officers need. And she has a schedule of when 5 years is up for an officer to get a new ballistic vest. She also applies for grants, for federal ballistic vest grants, matching grants. So in some way, she saves us a lot of money. Instead of paying for a full cost vest, she usually finds, half match from the federal government. So those are some of the things. She works on grants and then just keeps track of all her equipment. And if we, vehicle replacement schedule, she's working with a commander and upstairs. And there's just a lot of moving parts when you have 186 employees. Okay.
All right, Council President?
I gotta tell you, I used to work as a social worker in a juvenile detention home. And when a young woman pulled a switchblade on me in an enclosed room at night, at midnight, that does a lot to your feeling of self-confidence. And I can imagine with our officers, if they're being shot at, they need to go home to their families at night. They need to go. So I would put that 75,000 wellness right at the top of the heap for such a little amount. Hey, Steve, put it in the budget.
Yeah, I think as we go through this, let's put this in in an asterisk thing, and we can sort of pick and choose, and then go through, when they go through the deliberations, we can figure out what may not go in, and,
That's exactly why we're keeping the list. It was a priority from the police department, and we're not going to lose it.
okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Chief, go on.
Okay. So what do we want to accomplish as an agency in 23, 24, next couple of years? Provide for a safe community by having a positive impact on index and quality of life crimes. So we will do our very best to keep our community safe as protectors of Federal Way, and we will work on impacting crime. Crime analysis information and distribution, and implementation of directed patrols and operational plans. So we have plans, we'll continue to plan for addressing hotspots, problem houses, problem locations. We want to increase uniform police presence in downtown, particularly with light rail coming in. We have a 5-unit SOU bicycle unit. We want to get that up to the 6 officers as we increase our staffing in our uniform division. We want to maintain our national CLIA accreditation. We want to successfully undergo WASPIC state accreditation. And I'm hoping to, again, as I mentioned, hope to deliver some good news to you later this year. And then community engagement and build partnership. We want to continue to do outreach with our community, build trust. We're going to need to do it one contact at a time. Expansion of our Safe City Camera program to enhance public safety. Currently, we have about $100,000 set aside, funding from state that we received. So I've been in communication with Director Fetchner. We want to continue to expand. We're looking at places kind of on the north end, 288 and Military, 288 and 25th. Those areas, we have some areas designated, Dash Point and 320th. We want to maybe put a camera out there. So we've been in talks about where we want to spend that money. Continue regional collaboration partnership to address crimes such as drugs, auto theft, gangs, and gun violence. We can't do it alone. We need to partner with other agencies to do that, our state and federal partners. And then traffic enforcement with focus on DUI, reducing speed, and distracted driving. I believe we're up to five fatality accidents this year. So, and some are DUI related. So we want to continue to put focus there for the next 2 years. And then CAPS unit, outreach to the community, providing education, enhancement services. We want to continue to do partner with state funding for the Registered Sex Offender Verification Program. We want to address, we don't allow illegal encampments on private or public property, and we work closely with code enforcement, community development, Parks Department, our Special Operations Unit, and I think we've done a fabulous job as a community, because if you tell me we have a illegal encampment, we go to work. We don't have the problem that many communities do. Another really positive thing that our community has done under Mayor's initiative is our graffiti abatement program. If you really drive around, you're not going to see too much graffiti in our city. And so illegal encampments, it's work in progress. So we'll continue to do that as a city. Professional development and leadership training opportunities for succession planning. Myself, Deputy Chief Sumter, that I was bragging about earlier to all of you, and Deputy Chief Neal. I couldn't do my job without these two gentlemen, but, all of us have 30-plus years of experience. And we have commanders that probably less than 5 years before they go into retirement. It's really critical to develop new people coming up in the organization to keep running our organization. So I think succession planning will be important. And then promote officer wellness and safety at every level. So that's my presentation. I'm available for more questions.
Councilmember Dovey.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Distracted driving, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. Do we actually proactively pull people over and fine them if they got their cell phone in their hand and give them tickets and make it a priority, or is we just, how active are we in enforcing that law?
Yeah, we receive grant funding for one. So there's extra patrols. We have our traffic unit, and their focus is when they're working, they respond to accidents. Then they work on traffic complaints, abandoned vehicles, speeding complaint locations, and they just do generally traffic enforcement. So we have 4 officers assigned to that unit. And then we have, during holiday times and periodically, we'll use state Traffic Safety Commission funding to do Target Zero enforcement, DUI enforcement, distracted driving. We're issuing probably in the area of 600, 700 tickets a month.
For distracted driving?
For just traffic enforcement in general. But I would tell you a new trend in law enforcement. Traffic enforcement statewide is significantly down. And here's what's happening. Officers are reluctant to issue because they have discretion. They're issuing less tickets because when they pull people over, they're good people. Now, you got to do a certain level of enforcement to keep our streets safe, but they're less reluctant statewide because the people that you really want to write tickets to, guess what they're doing?
Running.
They're running. So the officer mentality is they're reluctant to stop nice people, in our community and hand out them tickets, and the ones they want to issue to, these people get on the sidewalk and they just flee. And now, as a criminal, why wouldn't you steal a car? Because before, if you stole a car, you could be detected and maybe arrested, particularly middle of the night. Now they know if they do organized shoplifting, any burglary, anything, long as they get into a car, they know in this state, you're home free. Because if officers intervene, guess what? We're committing a crime. It's not a policy violation anymore. You're violating state law. And officers aren't ready to go to jail, so they're, backing way off. So that's what I'm hearing from the officers, is like, the ones I really want to write, I can't, and I'm just a little less likely. So,
Okay.
and that's just the reality of what's happening.
Okay, so I have two more questions. You talk about stolen car enforcement, and I've talked, anyway, GPS. And if there was GPS on someone's car, and they opted in so the police could go, they reported it was stolen, and could we actually then go arrest somebody or go retrieve it or do something because they opted in? Because people that lose their cars tend to have their life really messed up big time. And is that something that's ever been thought about? We had a little bit of discussion about that, but is that something that would make our city different or more, get more bad guys?
Sure, it could make it different. We have, like I said, we have ALPR, we have, some vehicles are equipped with low jack, we find vehicles that way. ALPR finds a lot of vehicles. If we have other technology, I'm not opposed to it. It just, as a policy group, do you want to spend that kind of money and to do it? I just wanted to share with you, one of the crimes that we're seeing a significant increase statewide, but here's the numbers for Federal Way after August. We had, last year was high too. This time, end of August, we had 513 vehicles stolen. In '22, 848. And I'm telling you, the people who get their car stolen, significant number of these people, I mean, that's the last thing they could afford to happen to them.
So did I hear that right? We had 842 stolen cars in Federal Way last month?
No, 848 through August. of
Through
this year.
August, so for the
8
whole
months.
year.
So we're losing 100 vehicles a month.
100 vehicles a month are getting stolen in Federal Way right now.
And I haven't seen these kind of numbers. So if you go back to 2020, I'm sure we're, way over 100%. But last year number was high. This year, we're up 65%. I think it's kind of flattened out. We're losing about 100 vehicles a month. And there is times where we're losing maybe 30, 35. So each month, 70, 80, 70 residents in our community are getting their car stolen before the no pursue law went into effect.
Is there any statistics of who those people are, what type of cars? Is it the same? Is it, are they stealing Mercedes, or are they stealing old pickup trucks, or what's the breakdown? Who's really getting hurt by that? I mean, everybody's getting hurt, don't get me wrong.
Lower income folks, because when you have expensive cars, they're harder to steal, and the bad people don't want to steal those because generally they have GPS tracking. So the people, when I say people that can least afford to have their car stolen, that's what we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing the older Civics, Ford, a lot of trucks are being stolen, but for some people to take a, $15,000, $20,000 hit, that's, life and death to them. Maybe for most of us, we're out 15, 20,000 because there's depreciation, what you owe, and things like that. We'll probably survive that. It hurts, but we'll survive it. But for some people, they have no safety net to come up with $15,000, $20,000 to get another car.
Do many of those 800-plus cars get recovered, or do we have those statistics, or are they just gone to the chop shop?
All of the above. They could be for just transportation, they could be for parts, they could be for all that. And a lot of the people who get their car stolen, because their finance situation, a lot of them just have liability insurance. They don't have
Okay. And,
full recovery.
okay, the other question has to do on page 47 of our budget book. I don't know the difference between Code 98, which says jail services in 2020 for $2,712,884, and then it's nothing going forward. And then there's another one that says jail fund that starts in 2021, and, it's up 37% in 2023. What's the difference, or I don't know why we have one that's flat zero and one that keeps growing?
Okay. So just give you a little history. Our jail budget was $6.4 million when we, policy group, decided we're going to leave. This is just too expensive, 6.4.
It's a lot.
So then we were able to bring our jail costs down. We said, okay, we can do it for $2.4 million if we did the contracts. It was a painful experience with a policy group, but eventually we got the jail contracts. It was in place. So what's happening now is during the pandemic, we had low average daily population, we call ADP. So with the low ADP, our jail costs, we were operating even less than 2.5. Now, we are, when I checked in preparation for this budget meeting, I asked, what is our ADP today or this month? And they said 56. I've seen it higher as 60. So now the jails are opening up more, our officers are booking more people. So basically, what we're doing is when Director Groom and I worked this out, the 22 adjusted budget is, look how low that is from what's budgeted, around $2.5 million. I mean, $3.3 million. So what we're saying is we need for 23 and 24, 2.5 million, 2.7 million. And then we may need to come to you all for a budget adjustment because jail is getting very expensive. Everyone is increasing costs. Some jurisdictions have COLA plus 1% cost increase. Mental health inmates are costing us $300 per day or more. So we're looking at other alternatives. But I can tell you right now, we are booking more people in the jail. Much higher ADP, cost is up. So 2.5 million realistically isn't going to probably cut it for 23 and 24. But we have to have a starting point. I hope
So-
that answers your question.
So if we look at jail, the true cost of jail going forward, potentially, the cost that you have there is what it costs to book wherever we book, and then whatever our debt service is that we had a long time ago with SCORE, that's the true cost of what it costs somebody for jail?
Yeah. But if I was to share anything with you, I'm just telling you, we're still,
No.
as a city, saving $4 million a year.
No, I'm not.
It's great.
Yeah, I just didn't understand why so now I understand why it's that way. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor?
I think Councilmember Tran could go first.
Oh, Councilmember Tran?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. I want to follow up on the question asked by Councilmember Dovey earlier. So every month, we are losing about 80 cars in the city.
100 cars.
About. So from your perspective, from the law enforcement perspective, what can we do, or what should we do to reduce that number?
I would tell you right now, if you could work, as a collective body, if you can work with the state representatives, as from law enforcement, and our law enforcement association, we'll be asking lawmakers this coming legislative session, we need to change this law because the pendulum has swung way too much in favor of the lawbreaker versus the victim. And who is going to hold these individuals accountable? It's law enforcement. We need the tool to be able to, we're not advocating for more pursuits, but what this has created is our society is less safe by allowing criminals to have just too much, just total lack of accountability. And quite often, when we do catch them, they're not even being prosecuted. So that's a separate total issue, but from law enforcement perspective, 2, 3 in the morning, we didn't have that many pursuits. We had a very restrictive pursuit policy in Federal Way to begin with. And I would allow certain level of pursuits middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning. And when we did catch them, I mean, we had guns, masks. They weren't just stealing cars. They were up to no good. So there's a lot of violent offenders. They know that if they get into a car, we can't do anything.
Thank you.
Something's got to change.
All right, Deputy Mayor and then Council President.
Thank you. Working with the schools, we have officers in the high schools, is that correct, and not the middle schools?
Yes, we have 4 officers signed as school resource officers, 1 in each of the main high schools. And then the junior high, elementary, the school has their own security force that focuses more at those schools, but they partner with our SROs.
And is that relationship going pretty well with the school district?
It's going great, and at the next Parks Rec, Human Service, Public Safety Committee will be bringing an addendum. By state law, we have to renew the contract with the school every year, so we'll be bringing that forward to the policy group. But yes, the relationship is going great. One of the things in Federal, they never, at any point, wanted to eliminate the SRO program.
Oh, good. And my next question is there anything that, as a council, we can do to help your department protect the citizens better? We often, if you look at social media, which I do maybe once or twice a day, and sometimes you read, oh, the council doesn't support the police department and blah, blah, blah. Is there anything that we can do as a council to help you and your employees do your job better?
No, I would tell you that the mayor and council has been very supportive of the police department. Had you not been supportive of the police department, we would have lost a lot of our officers probably a couple of years ago. But this current council, very supportive. Our officers need to know that they have the support of their leaders, and that's what we get in Federal Way. So other than our normal nutrition or, during the anti-police, we lost a lot of people, but we would have lost a lot more. You can go to other jurisdictions that don't provide support, and they have hard time recruiting and retaining people. We're at a point now, hopefully next several months, we'll be down to low, 3 or 4 vacancies.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I mean, we all hear different things in
Right.
social media, but from the feedback I get, I think internally and externally, that the council really supports the police uniformly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Council President?
Well, I can tell you, having been involved with the community more intensely than usual in the last few months, that this community is fully behind our police officers. Not all, but the majority. And I think what I do want to pass on is that when I talk to some teachers at Decatur, they're very upset about guns being brought into the lockers at schools. Not in the classroom, but in the lockers, and it's frightening to them. And they're frightened, because in Decatur, you have a lot of hallways that go nowhere. But I just want to pass that on. I promised them that I would pass that on. I want to explain something else, and mostly so the officers can understand it. It's the way I understand it. I could be wrong, but this is the way I see, because I was in the legislature for 2 terms, 4 years. So when you have a vote, it's really better if you have, well, let's see, how can I say this without getting political? So when you have a vote, sometimes it goes through, it'll first maybe go through the House, and then go to the Senate, and then get changed, and then go back to the House, and then get signed by the governor, or vice versa, start in the Senate, and do the reverse. A lot of times, those decisions are made behind scenes in the caucus room, so that where it looks in the public eye that there's a close vote, and only one vote voted one way or the other, oh, gee, we were so close. No, you weren't close. The problem is, you have to change what's going on. You have to get people to understand we shouldn't coddle the criminal. And I'm just wondering why we're coddling the criminal. I don't get it. So they won't have a felony in their past, but everybody else is losing their cars, we have people dying? I don't get that. But if somebody could ever explain that to me, I would love it. But I just wanted to explain the process. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Dovey? Oh, and then Councilmember Asad. Actually, can I call on Councilmember Asad Dawson first?
Yeah.
No, mine is just simple. I think the way we can support is to also add this to our legislative agenda. That's all I was going to say.
Great idea. Thank you very much, Councilmember.
What was it?
The question here was, how can we support you and, especially with legislation? And I think it's to add it to our legislative agenda for 2023.
Different ways to support. Councilmember Dovey? Thank you.
Yeah, I had one more follow-up question on the GPS thing. I understand, I think I understand if someone stole a car and you had GPS on them, you probably couldn't chase them. That's probably the state law. But if the car got stolen and it was parked on 16th Street and whoever had the GPS called in and said, reported my car was stolen, and you had, as a police department, had the access to go on the screen and see where the car was and had a report, could you go pick it up? and if the person wasn't in the car that, and it's parked, you're not chasing them, but the person in the car was not the owner because they had stolen it, we could prosecute them, and then it would be up to the prosecutor of King County or Federal Way or whatever to press charges, right? But we would be able to get the car back to that person easier than we could today.
Absolutely, yep.
And if, I don't know, if there was grants out there or somebody wanted to help pay for GPS to put in citizens' cars and they opt in, we could do something like that maybe?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
All right, council, any other questions? All right, Chief and command staff, Chiefs, thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Okay, Public Works, presentation by E.J. Walsh, our Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So in the back with me tonight is our Deputy Director, Desiree Winkler, as well. Let's see if I can actually start this before I get a phone a friend. All right, so I am going to go through the Public Works Department budget. I got the green box too. Thomas, what did you do to get rid of the green box last time?
Uh-oh. Hey, you forgot your cape. And the eyewear.
And your dinner?
It's your new uniform.
Exactly. But we know who he is, though. That's the, you can only wear that where people don't really know who he is.
So for whatever reason, the green box is done based on like the portion of screen.
Thank you. I'll be here all
But
week.
you're choosing that. Oh, you know what?
Well, you're lucky. One more day left.
Exactly.
And it
That's
might-
right.
okay, that's why. Just share the whole screen. And then go through. You'll be good.
All right, thank you, Thomas.
Da-da-da.
So we're going to go through the Public Works presentation, and there's a couple different funds that fall into Public Works, so I will step through each of them. Before we do that, we'll go through the department overview real quickly and some of the key accomplishments over the last 2 years, and that is our staff members that are dressed up as part of the salmon release that we do with the school district. So the department organizational chart is in front of you. It's in the budget book as well. We have several different divisions that span the engineering, traffic, which is Rick's, fleet management, which is Dave Nelson, operations division, which covers everything in the field, which is Gene Greenfield leads that, Cole Elliott leads development services, and then environmental services is led by Rob Van Orso. We also have the sound transit liaison, which is Kent Smith, and then Desiree, myself, and then we have 3 admins within our department. So department funds, as I mentioned, we are responsible for several different funds, and both annual funds as well as special revenue and enterprise funds. So a couple of key accomplishments during the current budget cycle are coming up on the screen in front of you. I'm not going to read them all to you. There's a more expansive list in the budget book. But to say it has been a busy last 2 years, even with COVID, is a little bit of an understatement. We've seen a lot of construction citywide, both city-initiated as well as private development. We, this past year, saw a modified version of Storming the Sound with Salmon come back in partnership with the school district, which was nice to see that the classrooms could experience that again. And then we've had, on the operations side, multiple snow and ice events. We've done recycling events. We've implemented the litter program on the streets as well as the WashDOT ramps. So some of the metrics that we track, and as council is very well aware, Public Works thrives on numbers, and we are a very analytical and data-driven department. So the ones in bold are the ones I want to draw your attention to. So these are for 2022 numbers year-to-date. So you can see for the number of service requests we processed, so these are public requests, and these are across everything we do. We've exceeded where we had for 2021 already, year-to-date. The projecteds are based on the 5-year running averages. And then the annual CIP, this year we did approximately $10.2 million worth of construction, and then over the next 2 years, that grows significantly. The other one I will draw your attention to is the number of garbage complaints responded to. So the 2551 is where we were projected to be when we implemented Eyes on Federal Way. We are at 2282 year-to-date as of today. So just projecting that forward, we're expecting over 2,800 this year as an actual. So grants received, we've limited this down on the presentation. They're all in the budget book, but only 2 grants for the key grants as grants that are over $1 million. As a department, we are very proud of this slide. So the last time I made this presentation 2 years ago, I told you we were proud. It was the largest in the city's history. We had approximately 10 million in grants we had received in one budget cycle. It was the highest in the city's incorporation, or since incorporation. This year we're at almost 66 million. So over the last 2 years. Now I will say 50 million of that is in 2 grants that are from the state. So even if we were to take them out, we're looking at $16 million worth of grants we received in the last 2 years compared to, call it 10 million in the 2 before that. So this is the 3rd budget in a row we've been able to say it's the highest that we've had in the city's history. A lot of staff work, time and effort goes into this, and a lot of this is driven by our relationships with the grant agencies. So some key goals for the next 2 years include a lot of construction, the commencement of construction of the Joint Use Operations Facility, and then public outreach and engagement, especially around surface water and solid waste, has become kind of key items that we are being driven a lot by our NPDES permit requirements. It's become key focuses in the department as well. So diving into the funds specifically, the first one we'll tackle is the streets fund. So all of these items that are on your screen in front of you are included in the budget. These are new items, or more specifically, expansion of current items. I will tell you that there is nothing that is nice to have stuff on here. So it is things like the increased cost from King County for right-of-way maintenance. That cost increases to keep the same level of service that we have today. That is not to expand the service. That is a result of the negotiations between King County and the respective labor groups that work with them, and that cost gets passed on to us. Winter operations, as council is very well aware, every year we come to council in January or February and say we had 10 grand in the budget and we've spent $115,000 on salt. We need to true up the budget. So I am happy that the finance department and Director Davis has worked to get this actually in the budget as opposed to being reactionary as we have every year for the last 5 years. And then power, maintenance, and software, those are all just to keep up with where we are today. That's nothing new. So the unfunded items, there's several on here. So school zone flasher upgrades is the first one. That is for the school district school zones. The preemption system, or otherwise known as Opticom, there's the first line would be to restore functionality to all the intersections today. The second line would be to actually upgrade our system to current standards. Ultimately, as a city, we have to make choices of what we fund, what we don't, and these are on the keep them in the bucket list. So the rest of these items on here are ones that were driven by requests to our department, so additional trash counts in the downtown area, canopy vegetation management program, increasing the streetlights, and expansion of the NTS program. So the challenges we have for the streets fund is, as we've kind of touched on, the increased request for service. As I mentioned, year to date, we're closing in on where we thought we would be December 31st. The litter and theft of copper wire, I'm happy to say it is slightly down from where we have been the last couple of years. It's definitely still an issue, but we've taken steps over the last couple of years to harden a lot of our system, and it's starting to pay off. So we absolutely still have copper wire theft. We had vandalism. We had a cabinet broken into this morning. But, you know, the number of times that is happening is decreasing. So solid waste and recycling, and streets is the largest of these. The rest of these are a little bit easier to digest. Solid waste and recycling is a utility enterprise fund. There was no unfunded requests in this. This is purely to keep up with the cost of doing business and the cost of buying outreach materials. This is not new staffing. So that increase in education outreach staffing, that is maintaining the same positions, but the way the budget is set up, it's just where the lines fall. It's not adding staff. So operating supplies, as I mentioned, the cost of especially printed outreach materials is substantially going up. So the challenges we see, again, that litter theme, it's definitely an issue that we focus on every day. As I just mentioned, the cost of outreach materials are greatly outpacing the cost associated with in the budgets. And then outreach has become a challenge with COVID. We do a lot of Zoom outreach. We do a lot of small community outreach, but kind of the days of large recycling events, large gatherings with 200-300 people for an outreach style event are kind of gone. It's a lot of small group work, a lot of tabling at the farmers market style stuff where you're talking to groups of 4 to 6 people at a time as opposed to talking to a large group. So surface water management, as I mentioned, education is becoming a key part of this focus, as is water quality, and then operations. They're literally the guys in the ditches, as you see there. So this, this is the only slide I have budget account numbers on that left-hand side. And this is something, so this came before council probably about 2 years ago when the new NPDES permit came into place. We have some increased requirements around what we have to do as far as public education to be compliant with the permit the state issues to us on behalf of the EPA. So in what was approved previously as part of the new permit, there were a whole lot of lines that said increase in education outreach per the NPDES permit. So there they are on the slide. It's not the most descriptive slide in the world, but that's why all the account numbers are there. So these are all, like I said before, these were all things that have previously been in front of council, but we do need to incorporate into the budget as expansions. Most of this outreach focuses on students in the school districts, the Storming the Sound program, as well as just general outreach we do. It also focuses on standing up the stream team and enhancing the car wash program that the city has already gotten in place. Then there is additional targeted outreach. So when we get complaints, dog poop is a common one from one property owner about another property owner, and we have to send staff out as far as education about surface water pollution. So that all is what you're seeing on the screen in front of you. The challenge is the NPDES permit keeps going up. The expectations keep going up, the reporting keeps going up, what we have to do to be compliant keeps going up, and there's no new resources that come with that. So that is definitely a challenge. We've also seen a lot of construction with dedicated facilities to the city. So when a new residential cul-de-sac or a group of houses or most of the time not a commercial building are constructed in the city, those stormwater facilities are turned over to the city. So we effectively become responsible for everything from mowing the pond to cleaning a pipe out if it clogs to going out and moving leaves. And when we receive that infrastructure, there's no new staff, there's no new funding that comes with it. So that constant dedication of facilities, which is good for the growth of the city, is a challenge on the operations side. We also struggle to recruit and retain seasonal workers. Anybody knows someone over 18, but that, college-age kids that want jobs, please send them our way, send them to the Parks Department. We are both constantly looking for seasonal workers. Fleet and Maintenance Fund. So this is what's included in your budget in front of you. The top portion of it is parks. So Public Works is responsible for the fleet for the entire city, with the exception of the police department. The police department, as the chief mentioned, handles their own fleet. We do work with Kristen pretty closely to make sure everything is handled and we can mutually benefit each other. We handle the contract administration and procurement related to all of the service contracts, and then once that's in place, basically turn the PD side over to the police department, and they handle the actual day-to-day execution of that contract and scheduling and everything related to that. And it's very much a team effort to get that in place. So on the Parks Department, there's a list of equipment. Most of this equipment was due to be surplused many years ago. As you can see, we have equipment dating back to 2004. I believe this replacement blower from for the tractor actually even predates that. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's a 1999 piece of equipment. On the street side, you can see we're replacing a truck that was supposed to be replaced in 2017. Then the next two items are actually cleanup items. So both of these items were previously approved through FedRec. However, with the supply chain, the way it's going, we ordered these when we received approval from council, but we have not accepted delivery. So it's restricted money, but we do need to carry it forward in the budget. That way, when we actually receive it, we can pay for it. And then surface water, again, it is replacement of equipment that is long past its lifespan. So the only unfunded item that was requested as part of the fleet fund is an asphalt planer. This is specifically for fixing potholes. This ties into the overlay program and just where the funding levels for that program are. That potholes in both our city street system and our parks trail system have become more and more prevalent over the years. And this is, as opposed to going out and throwing a bag of cold mix in and kind of tamping it down, this is actually an attachment that goes on the front of the skid loader to address them. However, it is in that bucket list of unfunded. So the challenges of fleet is the increased cost of supplies and vehicles, as council is very well aware, and then the challenge of getting vehicles. So we have vehicles, when we order them, they're anywhere from 12 to 24 months from when we issue a purchase order to when they actually show up. In addition to that, we are desperately struggling to find equipment that can be rented. So a lot of the construction equipment the city uses across the board, we rent. And even finding that has become more and more of a challenge. So the capital program, and I will go through this, I'm happy to answer any questions on specific projects, but I'll go through this somewhat quickly since in June and July, respectively, of Streets and SWIM, both CIPs came before council via LUTC and were approved in the 6 and 7 year plans. So this is really just incorporating those projects into the budget. But please, if anyone has questions, please stop me. I don't want to gloss over it, but at the same time, I do recognize that it was just before council a couple months ago, so I don't want to belabor the points. So the overlay program in 23-24 is funded through a combination of real estate excise tax, motor vehicle fuel tax, or MVET, as well as the tax on the solid waste utility. And then we are projecting for that funding to continue through the duration of the CIP currently. For the purpose of the budget, only the 23-24 years are actually being adopted, but the CIPs are required to be 6 or 7 years respectively, depending on which one you're talking about. So to be transparent, we're sharing all of the information for council, but only the 23-24 numbers are actually in the adopted budget. The capital program on the transportation slide, this one is 2 pages, and it's all of the projects that we have been bringing piecemeal through council. As I mentioned, the CIP was before council earlier this year through LUTC, so I'm not going to go through project by project. If you have specific questions, like I said, I'm happy to answer them. But everything that was in the CIP, everything that has been presented to LUTC previously is incorporated into this. There's no deviations from that. Second half of the transportation program is here. This is where the Sound Transit funding is operated through, as you can see in the middle of the slide. And then there are several projects that are mitigation projects for Sound Transit, so that fiber optic network loop that's on the bottom of this page is one of those. On the surface water side, this is the same thing. This was also just before LETC a couple months ago, so I don't want to belabor this one either. And the same thing goes that even though this is shown through 2028, we are only adopting the 23-24 portions of this budget. Again, I'd say the same thing, that there's been no changes since what was presented previously. So I am happy to answer questions about projects, but I'm not intending to go project by project and explain them. So the future challenges overall to the department, the funding level for operations and maintenance. This is something I know we've talked about previously with council. It's a continued challenge. The cost of materials, everything from a bag of concrete to a ton of asphalt, has gone up drastically. Gas, diesel, the whole 9 yards, everything we do has seen 8 to 20% increases this year. And obviously none of the city budgets have grown to match that. So that, choosing what we do has become more and more of a priority. We also struggle with the continued rising service level expectations of the community. Litter is a prime example where we've gone out, we've applied to staff to it. We have full-time 80 hours a week and a truck that go around and deal with hot spots, emptying trash cans that are overflowing before our contractor gets to them, picking up litter from the right-of-way. I'm sure you've seen them out in our Mad Vac or our Litter Critter, or it's got half a dozen other names that the community's given it. And as we've done that, we've seen more and more requests come in for smaller and smaller trash, which on one hand, I'm very thankful that the community is noticing the work that's being done. But the expectations that go with that they're a challenge to try and continually match that. We're also starting to see aging infrastructure. The stormwater pipe that goes under the Lakota Park and out to under Dash Point Road is a shining example of this. The berm in the back of Lakota Park, where we were just informed there's been some settlement under the outlet structure, is a shining example of this. A lot of our infrastructure as a city was built at the same time, so it's kind of reaching maturity at the same time. And this is going to be, for the next 5 to 10 years, a bigger and bigger issue. So next dollar priorities, as Director Groom mentioned, he asked that each department put together a list, and that's what's in front of you, prioritized essentially based on where we as a department see the, if there are next dollars, kind of where it would make sense in our view on an operational side. Obviously, we are open to feedback and input on this. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Councilmember Dovey?
I just had two questions. When you had the slide for street funds and you had school flashers and things like that, are any of those safety issues, or are they just, we'd like to have them issues?
So that is to conform with the current requirements, yes.
That's what?
To conform with the current requirements for school zones, yes.
So why would it be as a option?
So most of the things that are on that list are driven by a standard somewhere, and
Right.
they get prioritized. That is something that's been on the list for the last 3 budgets and hasn't been funded.
But
But-
you just told me that is not an option, it's a safety issue, or did I hear that wrong?
So it's a calculated risk, absolutely. They should comply with the current standards.
Okay.
That being said, like I mentioned, there's a lot of competing priorities of the city, and everything has to get ranked and fall where they may.
Okay. So as I've heard, we got this list of things that we're gonna have, the ask-fors or the budget. I mean, wouldn't it be a way to prioritize some of those that might be more important because of the risk factor, as we look at it, and kind of prioritize them that way also?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the other one is just a nit, but a Sound Transit vehicle at $83,000, what are we buying? That's a lot for a Lariat truck or whatever. it
So it's actually a Sprinter, and it's not just that. It's all the equipment, the inspection equipment. And what we have done is and I said Sprinter, they're actually the Ford Transits. But what we've done is the Ford Transits get outfitted as that staff's work area. So we put a small work area in the back. But the majority of that, a Ford Transit's roughly $50,000, which
Yeah.
is the same cost as an F-150.
Okay, so.
The rest of that's
really-
inspection equipment.
So really, it's not just a vehicle, it's a vehicle and a work area and a computer and tricking it out so they can actually work there and.
And about $25,000 worth
Yeah.
of inspection
And then-
equipment to
and
do
then
their
10
job.
years, we'll sell it to somebody who wants to go camping, right?
Most likely.
Okay.
It's a good question. Way to get into that. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. The neighborhood safety program is a next dollar priority. That's,
Correct.
we still have that, some money in the budget for that, right?
Correct. It's funded at, drawing a blank if it's 30 or 50,000 a year right now.
Steve, do you remember?
I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't.
So
So-
as a council, we decided that we wanted to expand that program. So I believe as a council, we would still want to keep that program expanded because we have so many requests and needs in the community. I'd like to see that elevated.
Can I ask a follow-up that, and we hone that down, and we're gonna put that in the asterisk pool?
Okay.
EJ, if we were going to add money to the, let's call it 25 or 30 right now, what would be would it be a doubling of that to 60? What would move the needle per se?
So there were 3 requests that went with the NTS program based on what the feedback council had previously provided. One was going out and buying modernized equipment to actually do the data analysis. The equipment we're using is from the mid-90s. We use traffic tube counters to actually, which it's not feasible to do the data analysis using that equipment for the numbers that we're seeing right now. So the request number 1 was to replace that with essentially radar equipment that can be moved much easier and collect data much faster. So that was request number 1. And I would say if there was a one-time funding of any amount that went to it, that equipment would be priority 1. Priority 2 was exactly what the deputy mayor just raised, and it was expanding the amount per year that was done. And then priority 3 was, and they're not priorities, it's really part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 3 was in addition to doing kind of the NTS style improvements we have been doing, to add a signage component to it, be that for anything from no parking signs to whatever other community requested signage that came in as a standalone thing in that program.
Let's go back, not the signage, but the middle one, about additional funding. What additional funding would help, that would be a meaningful advance, that would meet the council?
So I think first and foremost, we have to have the equipment to be able to do that. So without the equipment, we don't have the ability to process more than we're handling today to get to the point where we can
And how
do
much
what
is that?
your issue. I believe the equipment, I can pull it back up. I think to buy all the equipment to do the entire program that was outlined was, I believe, an $80,000.
Okay, 80,000. So let's put that in the asterisk pile. Do you have any salary savings, or has that already been captured?
That's already been transferred out of our budget.
Okay.
And I'm taking the waiting list seriously, because with the inflation and the recession that we're looking at, when we're forecasting sales tax revenue by the end of first quarter, as 2023 plays out, there's a strong possibility that we could have been too conservative in our budgeting, and we will have revenue. So I'm not, just giving you lip service, putting it on a waiting list. We have a plan.
Okay, well, when the council gets down to deliberations, there will be and then ultimately, because we did, the proposed budget spends up to that line, then it's going to be a matter of, do we have an ability, do we have available sources of revenue that can fund this, or is there something that needs to come off the list that something is already budgeted? So we'll just have to figure that out.
So if this funding isn't available, then the program stays as it was. Is that correct?
That's something we're gonna have to dig into. So I think the program, the criteria, the scoring, the way that we evaluate projects, we, as being burdensome to the community, the feedback we got was to remove the petition project and to have staff rank the requests as they came in and then bring them to council on an annual basis. It's hard to keep the program the same if we are doing that component too without the data to drive the decision. If it goes the direction you outlined, we will, as staff, need to figure out something. But as I stand here today, I don't know what that is. But we will, by December of next year, have to figure out a way to rank the requests we have and bring that to council, probably absent data.
By December of '23?
Yeah, so the projects for 2023 are already approved and funded by council. So we're really talking about projects in 2024 construction.
So if a neighborhood came to you today, it would still be the petition process?
No, we would take their request and so the council has already approved the projects for construction in 2023. So any of the requests we get fall into the new program, but there's no the construction's already allocated within the current 2023 budget that is fully utilized. So any new requests that come in today would go into the 2024 construction cycle.
And so how much is in the budget for '23 then? If, I don't need to know tonight.
It's
but-
either 30 or 50,000. I can confirm that
Okay.
answer. It's one of those two numbers.
Okay. And then the tree canopy management, can you explain what that is to me, please?
Sure. So that is a request that originated originally actually with council around the aquatic center.
Yes.
And then we've received that request from several other community members around Celebration Park, around PVR, Pack Highway, First Avenue. And that is, again, more or less a data-driven, going into areas where the trees have gotten really big to be short-winded, and effectively either remove them, trim them, whatever the case may be, and plant smaller, most of the time more appropriately scaled trees. As a city, prior to incorporation, a lot of the trees that were planted were just what was available at the nursery. And unfortunately, a lot of, especially the maples, they're way too big for the space they were put in. So that is that program to start. $150,000 will not do any of those roads in its entirety. But what we were asked to do was to figure out a funding level that would effectively make a dent in it and set it up as an annual program to slowly, tackle it one bite at a time.
So when I spoke maybe 2-3 years ago about Campus Drive and the trees that are tearing the road up and making the beautiful flag poles and flags, invisible when the trees are in bloom, I believe you told me it was going to be at least $4 million to do Campus Drive.
To rebuild the sidewalk, to remove the trees and plant trees that are appropriate, yes. And I believe that actually fixed the curb line and the edge of the road where as you just mentioned, the road's been buckled as well.
Mhm.
You are correct.
So 150,000, I mean, I don't even know what you could do with that amount of money, so I'm a little curious about that, but.
So campus is by far the worst on that list that I just
Yes.
listed. The roads plural along Celebration Park are probably the next two worst.
Mhm.
A lot of the other roads, we could tackle one of those roads in effectively 2 years with this program. So it's still, like I mentioned, it's one bite at a time. It is not a holistic program that we're knocking it out in a year. But it's to start slowly making a dent. But you're right, as far as the aquatic center goes, it would take a lot of years.
Are there any grants that have come up that, for this kind of work?
We've looked and we continue to keep an eye on that. This is work that's generally considered maintenance, and it's considered maintenance as a result of a decision to plant something that was not appropriate. And granted, that wasn't the city's decision, but so there's not really grant funding available for this. Where there's the opportunity for grants is on a project like Campus, if we were to go in and widen the road and add, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's some other warranted improvement, and this effectively became follow-on work that was required to do that project, that's the area where we could potentially receive grant funding. But as far as grant funding to more or less do the scope that you outlined for campus, no.
And do you know how many vehicles we purchased with COVID money for your department? Or,
For my department, I believe we purchased 2. We purchased a fair number of trucks for the Parks Department. Police Department purchased a fair number as well. And then I can get you an exact number, but no, I don't know off the top of my head.
I would like to know how many were purchased for actually each department with COVID money. Thank you.
Okay, and just share that with the entire council. Councilmember Dovey?
I just had a question, a clarification question. When we were talking about ARPA money, we had money for streetlights, and then I see here it's increase in streetlight program, 190,000. Is that, how's the difference? Is that, did we not just do that?
So it's twofold. So yes, you are correct on the ARPA side, and the ARPA side more or less tackles the open list that is there today. The other feedback we've gotten is how do we make that a sustainable program that we are doing a real number of lights per year. That also covers knockdowns, so any sort of vehicle accident, we do attempt to recover, and Tanya and Director Call's group are fairly good at recovering where we have a party that can be recovered from. But uninsured motorist, hit and run, all of that, frankly, that's the majority of the knockdown polls.
I understand that.
All right. Deputy Mayor?
So the next section will be talking about the operations and maintenance yard?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, EJ. Okay, now let's move on to item 3, the debt operations shop and capital planning. We'll hear from Brian Davis, Steve Groom, and EJ Walsh.
So I believe I'm the one starting this, and Director Groom's going to join me. And we're going to, as the mayor mentioned, tag team this presentation. So a little bit of a presentation overview is an overall process and schedule update, review of the cost, funding, and then Director Groom's going to speak specifically about the funding, bond, and debt portions. So the overall project task as an overlap timeline should be on your screen. The preliminary project identification happened in 2019. And then we started preliminary planning. The adoption of the site selection criteria happened by council in early 2020, which informs the set of requirements to identify the property, project, and scope. We went through a site selection phase. Earlier this year, we brought a recommended preferred site to council for acceptance, and that occurred. The design has commenced on the timeline. That's where we are today. And then we are targeting occupancy by the end of, no later than the end of 2025. So the review of the costs, so the base costs, and I want to be clear and intentional about this. What we are calling the base cost, this is something that was discussed somewhat at length during the previous presentations, is the portion that includes the functions provided today. And then the next couple of slides go into the other things that were discussed with council previously to get to a total. So what that includes is the design and permitting costs, the on-site construction, and the mitigation costs. What it excludes is, as I mentioned, the other topics we talked about previously, as well as the purchase of land. So the expanded items, and these are those items that we were talking about, is fueling, fleet operations, sign maintenance, and signal maintenance. So there's a breakdown of each one under it in italics that sums up to the total that you see in front of you. So the fueling component would cost about $750,000. Fleet operations, which is comprised of permitting, site improvements, and infrastructure, would be a little bit over $4.2 million. Sign maintenance and signal maintenance are both allocated at a little bit over $750,000. Upon evaluation and the payback times, what we determined was that the sign maintenance came off and the signal maintenance came off, and we were proceeding with these two items. So the land costs, the purchase of land was not included within the presented costs. The original assumptions, and this is just background data for, frankly, more for the public than the council members that I believe already are up to speed on this. But the original assumption was to surplus the existing property, which was valued by our appraiser at $6 million. There has been an ongoing discussion about retaining that for a park use and what that would entail. The rest of this presentation is effectively both ways. We are not, as part of this budget process, asking for the council to make a decision on to keep or surplus the land. That'll happen at some point in 2023. That is not something that's on the docket for the budget. So the base cost, this is kind of the summary that I mentioned, plus the fueling, plus the fleet gets you to that total price for the build out. So on the bonding side, we started with 4 options. The preferred site is kind of that second column, which includes selling the current property. That middle column is also the preferred site with keeping the existing park, and then site 1 and site 2, which subsequently came off. So these are the 2 options we're really here to discuss. The difference between these is the cost of surplusing the existing property, as you can see in the middle of the slide. And then the corresponding, since SWIM and streets do operate as utilities and enterprise funds, to effectively make everything whole, the payment to convert that away from those uses to a park. So as you can see, that's effectively the difference. The impact to that is that bottom right-hand corner, the park's annual debt service, which would equate to a little bit over $410,000 at the bond, and we'll get into the actual bonds in the next couple slides. So a couple of bond assumptions. These have been in place essentially since we started getting into detailed conversations. These have been shared with council previously, but just to be transparent. The assumed term of the bond is a 20-year bond. The rate is assumed at 3.5%. I will let Director Groom talk about the actual rates currently as part of his presentation. The SWIM portion is proposed to be paid and is allocated within the current CIP that council saw earlier. And then the streets portion is proposed to be paid through a bond against REIT and MVEP. And parks, depending on which option is ultimately selected in the future, will or will not have a bond associated with it. So fleet and operations, again, just to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page, that $750,000 cost to construct the fueling facility in its initial condition. We pay approximately $85,000 per year in fuel surcharge fees. That is not the fuel itself, that's the cost on top of buying the fuel. So with this effectively, on the next slide, you'll see works as a 10-year payback. On the operations side, that number's a little bit higher on both the construction cost as well as what we pay. We do a lot more outsourced maintenance on the fleet than we put fuel into tanks. So we're paying approximately $220,000 in overhead fees. So this payback works out to about a 17-year, it's like 17.2, I believe. And it does increase the level of service, specifically around emergency events. But either way, it is under that 20-year bond repayment timeline. So a breakdown of what that actually looks like. The bond amount you see in the middle of your screen, it's assumed to have a face value of $5 million, same terms. The annual payment for that bond works out to a little over $250,000 per year, adding the fuel and the surcharge as well as the overhead cost of our outsourced maintenance gets you $305,000. So this equates to a annual savings to the Fleet Operations Enterprise Fund of about $54,000 a year. So bond summary for the 2 options are in front of you. As I mentioned, there is no need for a decision at this point. This will come back to council at some point, most likely mid-2023, if I had a crystal ball about timeline. And that will be a discussion at that point with both the decision to keep or surplus, and then ultimately if the decision is to keep, what that disposition for the current yard is and what that looks like, and any additional improvements that we're talking about. So the budget summary, it is included within Fund 306, which is page 59 of your budget book. It's project ID number 610. And in the very small fonts, which is a corresponding page of your budget book, you can see it's the highlighted one, approximately 3/4 of the way down your book. And it is shown as budgeted to be starting or commencing construction in 2024. So future steps that do for this item's a little unique than most of the other budget presentations you've seen as part of this budget process. There are some next steps for the council to take. So council will need to authorize procurement of bonds. It's a future action. As I mentioned, determine whether or not we're going to keep or surplus the existing facility. Tentatively, that should be mid-2023. That comes back before council. And then authorize bidding of the project, which again, that's a future action. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Grimm.
Thank you. There is not a school or a hospital that builds a building without first doing a master plan. So I want to widen the subject matter right now because because we have a whole city that we're thinking about. And when we start talking about 20-year debt, why we are impacting our budgets in 20-year chunks. So the next few things I want to talk about are our debt capacity and our budgeted debt service, and then avoiding unnecessary debt. And I have heard some people ask, why can't we pay down all of our debt if we have $100 million? And we're now in the budget process. And what we're finding out is that we have all these restricted funds, and it is very difficult even to find 50 or 25,000 for this or that. So this does become a Sudoku puzzle. That's one of the things I thoroughly enjoy about budgeting, because we are going to solve a lot of problems. And you've already seen from every department presentation that we have been able to solve a lot of problems. The investment revenue has paid for the expanded police force. The increased sales tax has paid for a lot of increased costs that we're able to absorb. And Director Walsh just pointed out to you that we have a really good, solid plan for financing an operation and maintenance shop, and it's kind of complex, but we can make it work. But looking at the whole city in total, one of the questions, this is one of those slides I probably should have had my red circle move from spot to spot. It used to be able to point a laser pointer at a screen, but now it doesn't work. But and this is out of your budget book. It's on page 52. We've provided the formal calculation every year. It's required by state statute that we do this. And I'll point out two things. The lower right-hand corner shows that the city theoretically has $1 billion available in debt capacity, a whopping number. But really, the number that I have circled, 186 million, is really the amount of debt that the state formulas require us to disclose. You can only issue councilmanic debt in 186 million. Well, we all know that we couldn't afford the debt service in our budget. That's really the limiting factor. And the formula starts with the total assessed value in the neighborhood for the whole city of $14 billion. Monday, I just got the first preliminary assessed value from the King County Assessor, and it's going up to $17 billion. So the technical debt capacity for the city is not our limiting factor. It's our budget. It's our budget that's going to limit us. What can we afford and what can we project going several years out? The existing debt that we only have 4 issues, and I think we've talked about this previously. 2 of them pertain to the Performing Arts Center, 1 for the Community Center, and 1 for the Score Jail. These are for buildings, long-lived assets that will far outlast the debt. That's just the sort of thing you would want to issue debt for, because it makes a lot of sense. It spreads a very large cost that's ultimately borne by our taxpayers one way or another, but it spreads it across time, so that the taxpayers who are benefiting from the use of that building and all the things that go on in it, every year the users or the current citizens and taxpayers bear their share of the cost in those years. Budgeting for debt service is simple. It's non-discretionary. There are existing obligations to the city. There's nothing to debate. We just plug in the numbers of principal and interest straight out of the amortization schedules. Our city policy is to make sure that we budget the current 2-year, or the next 2 years' payments in the biennium of our into our debt service funds. So it's appropriated and spendable straight out of the debt service fund, but it's primarily real estate excise tax revenue that is funding our debt service. And just fundamentally, there's only 3 ways to pay for infrastructure. You either save, or you issue debt, or you issue pay as you go. And, you know, savings, that means we have to have revenue coming in that doesn't have something that's urgent and important. You know, Dave Ramsey says that every penny has to have a name on it. And so for us to have savings, you know, a lot of us would love to have, you know, we need to set aside money for when we see something coming. The way that we do that is we have to have revenue that we don't spend, and we leave it in fund balance. And that does actually happen in our capital funds. We have budgeted revenue in past years, and it's in process in Public Works or Parks or what have you, and it's still in fund balance. It's been set aside. It's revenue that we budgeted in prior years. We're saving it in fund balance because it's got a name on it. Debt obligates us for our future revenue. And pay as we go. All of the projects that you just saw EJ walk us through in the transportation, you know, streets, capital, all of that going into future years, we're going to be paying as we go because we're not mentioning issuing debt. We're forecasting revenue, and we're matching it with projects in the future. So we get a lot done on the city, in the city with pay as we go, and that's getting the most bang for the buck for our taxpayers. We're not adding interest expense to it. I did have a slide here, and this just repeats what EJ just told us, that the operations facility, we have a plan for issuing bonds. The debt payments come from partially reassigning the ongoing expense savings we'll have from fuel and fleet. There's a ringing on the sound system. I'm trying to modulate here. And then our ongoing debt service would come from the swim revenues and real estate excise tax, and general fund would be depending on what happens with that park piece. But let me talk to you about avoiding unnecessary debt. And I'd like to use perpetual vehicle financing as kind of the model, because we all understand vehicles. The city for many, many years, and not just this city, but all cities. You know, this is the 4th city I've worked for. Every city has had 3 of the cities have had a fleet replacement funds. 0 of them worked. And I go to finance conferences, and they have conference sessions on how to fix your fleet financing or how to fix the fleet replacement. And the best practices, the common knowledge, the way that people have always thought of for replacing vehicles, you take accountants understand depreciation. You buy a vehicle, you depreciate it, and you use that depreciation to fund the reserves. And then out of those reserves, you replace your vehicles. Our parks and public works and community development and police, they're magicians in extending useful lives. But then that comes back to bite us, because as inflation comes along, why we had a fully depreciated vehicle, we had reserves set aside, and now we have depreciation, and we find that we don't have enough reserves. In today's inflationary environment, that just exacerbates the problem. Also, we're probably no different. I wasn't here, but I imagine we had some tight budget years, and we might not have done the reserves we should have. I don't know. I can tell you, listening to cities everywhere, it's not uncommon. It has happened. So that's how we've always done it, and it is not working. And I'm committed. I'm committed to having finance be the piece of the solution that keeps the other departments from having to be magicians and keep things in good repair. Because here's the problem: if what we were adding to reserves exactly equaled what we were purchasing for replacements, it would work perfectly. It would work like clockwork. You almost wouldn't need reserves. If what we were putting aside for depreciation, we were spending every year to replace, the system would be working, but we know it hasn't been. So we need to turn a corner. EJ showed us a slide a few moments ago on vehicles. And in the accounting world, we have a fixed asset register, and we're showing that we've got the number of vehicles is 242. The replacement on a depreciation schedule, we should be replacing 1.4 million. And that's on average because some of them have different lives. And we agree with EJ, the vehicles that are in service that are beyond depreciation, it's about $3 million. So that's a hole that we need to work ourselves out of. Now, budgeting for reserves has resulted in some uneven purchasing. Part of that is because we have been replacing vehicles only when we have to, which is admirable, except as I mentioned, extending the useful life works against us. Community development, for example, has got 13 vehicles, and in the last 1, 2, 3 years, and then 2 years into the future, they're not asking for 2. We need to turn the corner to a system where we're replacing vehicles methodically. Police, parks, public works, you can see there's the total of vehicles in the first column and then how many they actually replaced in 21 and 22, and it's inadequate. And this is a financial problem. It's not new. It's decades old, and it's statewide, nationwide. So here's where we're starting to turn the corner. We have started working on this. Staff is working to research and work. It's kind of a database problem. The 3 pieces of the puzzle require a good IT database and system, and there's a lot of math involved, and it's working with the actual department managers, the fleet manager. Could be because we have to actually have not just what's on the accounting records, not what's on our fixed asset. We want to know how many actual vehicles really are in service. We want to know the current condition, which is one of the ways that they work their magic. Works wonderfully in streets. You would imagine that we don't replace every street on the same lifing schedule. A cul-de-sac doesn't have the same traffic and wear and tear that an arterial has. And so I know that we have to tell our auditors our depreciated useful lives, but then we have to get into the real world and say, what's happening in reality? Thank you for our maintenance. Appreciate that, but we want to make sure that we're planning properly for the perpetual replacement. And I want to emphasize the word perpetual because it never ends. It's not like at home where we know that when we retire, we can buy our last vehicle. Never happens at a city. So we need to switch to budgeting for our purchasing, not our reserves. And we're all used to saying that we have reserves, and we do. We look at the balance sheet; they're there. We need to make it spendable in the budget every year with the right amount. So, starting with 2023 and 24, we're working on increasing to pay as we go and police cars. We just added 28 police cars, so we added 308,000 for replacement spending. It's budgetable. We're working on identifying the vehicles scheduled to be replaced, and we need to work on budgeting continuous spending. Now, I use vehicles as the example because it needs to work for our parks infrastructure and our public works equipment and our IT servers and components and our major software systems such as the city management software that's coming due in 5 years. Now, I didn't put it into the slide, but the debt policy language that we've always adopted is in the back of the budget book. There is some really excellent language, but as you can tell, we need to fix something. So what I would love to propose, to involve you, debt and vehicle replacement is something that it's kind of policy level. And I would like to bring to FedRAC a proposed debt policy that, you want to have a voice in the policy of how we manage debt, not just for the operation and maintenance shop, but for always. And we also want to make sure that we're budgeting so that we don't need debt, so that we can avoid unnecessary debt. You could direct staff to bring us a better policy, and I'm hopefully you're already thinking that, and I'm beating you to it, but I think we can work together on that. So with that, I'll stop for questions. That's what we have in the budget. That's what we're planning for the future. Any questions?
Councilmember Dovey.
How are the interest rates going to affect everything? They've haven't they doubled from 3.5% or at least gone up 2 points?
In the 20-year range, it's not as volatile, but I'll tell you, when we go to issue debt, it's going to be where are we on the roller coaster? We know things are cyclical. Long-term rates actually are looking down, but, no promises, sir. I'll be open and honest, but,
And when we started this, 3.5 came from a day as a conservative number. They were actually 2.1 at the point we started this, and, he kind of tried to future-proof it a little bit. But yes, to your point, it's not 2.1 anymore. It's about 2.6 right now in this market. So we're still below it, but it's catching up.
So, one last question. If we know we're gonna do this and we're planning, if the rates are still reasonable under our projections, can we speed up when we do the bonds versus wait for more volatility, or is that something that you?
there's going to be restrictions on spending there. That starts a timeline ticking, so it gets tricky, and we're trying to be prudent. This is how cities, we can't predict the future. We'll problem solve our way through it. And I don't mean to sugarcoat it, but it'll probably be difficult, but what budget isn't?
Yeah, and it should be, right? I mean, you got to make decisions. And Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Tran. And actually, Councilmember Dovey, were you done?
Oh, I'm done.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. On the operations and maintenance yard, I think that you're missing some costs that we're going to have. One is replacing the property with another park. In the documents that were signed with King County when we took over that property, it does say that it's to remain as a park, or that it would be replaced with park property. So I think you're missing some money that we're going to have to find for that.
So that'll become my problem, not EJ's. is it?
No. Actually, no. Actually, let me clarify that. The legal counsel's already weighed in on that. The addition of Town Square Park already counts toward that, according to legal counsel. But in
Town Square
regard to our
Park
legal
is
obligation.
is 4 acres, and they're taking 11 acres, so I'm not sure about that.
So that will play out as part of the environmental process that we need to go through. You are correct, that is what the document says, and there's a process for scoring parks, that it's a quantitative process based on the assets, and it's scored, and it's not just based on area. So the city has added a number of parks since King County, and gave us that park. And I think at a staff level, obviously it needs to come back before council as part of the environmental process. There is a comfort level, as the mayor mentioned, from our legal staff, from my staff, that we have exceeded the requirements, and we do not need to purchase property as part of this to offset that. But that will be vetted in more detail by our consultants as the process moves forward.
All right. And also, I was just mentioning this in a meeting before this meeting. If this is going to be done, I would like to see it done right. And the council was pretty clear earlier this year that we wanted in this new facility somewhere where vehicles could be maintained, so we don't have to continue going out to have them maintained, spending more money, and that we wanted to be able to fuel our own vehicles. And I just think we need to do it right, and we need to do it once. And we don't need to burden councils and taxpayers in future years by not doing this the right way.
I absolutely agree with you.
So I would like to see it done the right way the first time.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a way you can put up page 7 of the budget book on the screen? Was that possible? Sorry.
Is that on the website?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
That's okay. If you can't, that's okay. So I just want to share with council my observation by looking at this number. So in 2020, our ending fund balance is $72.2 million.
We're getting to page 7. There you go.
Okay,
There we are.
thank you. So
Okay.
by 2024, our ending fund balance will be $56.4 million, which means that every year we are spend about $6 or $7 million more than we take in. If we are going with this rate and assuming there's no additional revenue coming in, then our ending fund balance will run out about 2030.
Let me set your mind at ease. We currently have got $19 million in ARPA, and we're assuming that we're going to spend it. That's a one-time. There's also some capital spending, I believe, in SWIM and possibly REIT, which may or may not get spent by then, but we're assuming that. So that's what the major decreases are. In the operational departments, we're balanced. So you're exactly right. It does decrease. It's in the neighborhood of 20 million, and ARPA explains a lot of it. Good catch.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, council, any other questions on that? Deputy Mayor.
No, but Councilmember Tran brings up a good point, because every year the ending fund balance has decreased a little bit. So without ARPA, so can we, on Tuesday, we're having a budget meeting. So what are we discussing on Tuesday? If we're done with this discussion, I'd just like to know the future.
Well, I want to get back to the, on that issue, I want to make sure that we put a period on the end of the sentence. We do have our reserves funded pursuant to council rule up to the $9 million. So that we're in line with council, policy, to have that fully funded reserves, and all the other reserves are fully funded in the different departments. Just want to make sure that's clear, that we're not running any kind of deficit, or we're not running that there's not some sort of horizon out there in which we sort of dip down below. We've got to watch expenditures, and we've got to look at that, but our reserves are fully funded. Could you repeat your question?
I'm ready for it.
Okay, go ahead.
To wrap this up, we've gone through all of the department study sections. We've gone through the revenue. We've covered all of the sections of the budget book. And where we're at now, if I have been listening to you over the last few budget study sessions, we started with the mayor's budget, and you have added some things that I think I'm hearing either consensus or near consensus support to amend the mayor's budget to bring you the final budget document that you'll be happy to adopt. I do want to tell you about one thing, and it's on the very top line. I have some new revenue, and I've mentioned this to city administrator and mayor, that based on the property tax, the assessed value, that the levy will go up about, the first estimate's $234,000. So that gives us some additional revenue that we didn't know about until this week. We have got, since we put the budget book together, we have got 1 month of sales tax that has come in very strongly. And today's Thursday. Come Monday, it's going to be October. I'm going to be looking forward Monday or Tuesday to the next sales tax remittance. Now we're getting down to the 11th hour, and I'm scraping at pennies under the couch cushion here. But that's the two pieces of revenue that I feel pretty optimistic, and by next Monday and Tuesday, I'll have a little bit of an update. Outside of that, I've listed the items that you've mentioned, and Mayor, tonight you added a couple more, and
Council, we
Yes, sir,
together through their
but,
questions.
right, so we can take the items just discussed, and I can come back to the next study session with, I think, what you are looking to finalize?
And I think Council, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but obviously we could get into a zero-sum situation in which if we want to add certain things need to come off. So I think actually if there are any items on the bubble, in regard to things that did make the proposed budget that, aren't necessarily absolutely bedrock required, in which council, we could queue up some decisions, or at least kind of sort of mix and match. I do recall when I first got on the council years ago, 19 years ago, we had great council members that were really good at that, about sort of, if not this, then that, sort of starting to put things together. I want to make sure that we have that ability to be able to equip the council with the sort of types of options. Does that sound good, council?
I guess.
Yeah, okay, so, Deputy Mayor?
I just want to thank EJ for the information he gave us. So, Director Groom, I know we've had this discussion, you and I privately, but then as a council, we all discussed this the other night about what we wanted to see. And the information that he presented tonight with things that, it was very detailed, and that's what I'm looking for in a budget book. So, thank you for that, because I've been missing that.
All right, Councilmember Seppa Dawson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So the details here you have on this is not in the handout that we received. But from there, I see that we have several positions that are under city council, like the CDBG coordinator.
I can answer that one. So the CDBG coordinator actually would be Community Development Department.
Okay.
The next one down, the City Council Admin Support, that would be City Council full-time.
Correct, and then there's, okay. So, when you look at page 61 of staffing, org chart, it says 4.2 for city council FTE. So 4.2 would be us plus admin?
Right.
Got it. So ours is what, point what?
I don't know the answer to that, but it adds up with the full-time admin will be
To
4.2.
3.2
So
then.
3.2, yes.
Divided 7, okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right, anything else for the good of the order, council? All right, thank you very much, great job, everybody. We are adjourned.